Hey everybody, my name's Johan Philip.
And I'm at Carvel.
And we are live!
Every Tuesday afternoon for live lunch. That is the place that we take the Sunday teaching and we have a discussion about it. We unpack the different themes, ask some different questions, and we're inviting you to get involved in it. Have a listen or submit some questions, that sort of thing.
And we have food. So if you want to find out about some good eating options around Brighton and Hove, tune into live lunch. So you get fed, well, we get fed physically, but you get fed spiritually. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. live on Instagram, then the video does sit on YouTube and podcast. If you like more information about how you can join in with the conversation at live lunch, weareemmanuel.com/live lunch. We look forward to seeing you there.
See you then. Hey everyone, welcome to Live Lunch. This is the place that we continue our conversation from Sunday and have a bit of discussion about how we unpacked the series that we've been going through here at Emmanuel, a series called Virtual Jesus, and looking at the I am statements of Jesus. And it's been great so far. I think I've certainly enjoyed it. And I'm missing my esteemed co-host, Johan. He is on the other side of the world and hopefully back very soon. And apologies also that we missed last week with Live Lunch. We're hit in a few directions that last week. And also, I'm just getting all the bad news out of the way first. Also, we won't have an episode next week either because it's half term and many of us are away. So apologies for that. So it feels like live lunch is like a rare commodity these days. But hopefully it will be even more worthwhile because of that. See, that's a great analogy. That is a great analogy. And I'm pleased with myself for that. I'm Matt, by the way. And this is George.
Hello.
Great to have you, George. Tell us about yourself. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
You've managed to almost, navigate around the colds and flus that are going around, but you're...
Yes. I'm sort of 50% here.
Yeah.
And so hopefully the things I say will make sense. We've also, our baby Olive is almost 3 months old.
3 months.
And I think last time I was on here, we spoke about that coming. And she laughed for the first time the other day.
Oh, that's cute.
Which is huge, frankly. That is huge. It's huge news for us. And finally getting something back.
Something you said?
It was not any of my jokes. It was at my wife.
That's a greater joy that is to come.
Yes. Yeah. I'll still make the jokes, but she's not laughing at them yet.
Yeah.
Bless her.
Good. And Toby, great to have you back as well.
Hello. Yes, good to be here.
How's it going for you?
Yes, it is going okay. Healthy and good. And all is well.
Great. And we have got food from, I believe, the Athenian, some Greek wraps, which I'm very much enjoying. It's always great food on Live Lunch. Thanks to all the team who have put this all together. Let's dive straight into the message from Sunday. Toby, you were preaching.
Mm-hmm.
Who are preaching, I am the resurrection and the life. We're looking at John 11, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just give us a quick recap of the message, really.
Yeah, gladly. Preached on I am the resurrection and the life. And I guess I really aim to focus on, firstly, on death. I thought it's probably a good idea to start with what Jesus is going to raise us up from, and it's not something that we talk about so much. So I thought I'm going to spend a good amount of time looking at what I called the intermediate state, which is the period between the spirit leaving the body in death, right up until the moment Jesus returns and the body is raised from the dead for the believer, and they're reunited. And so we looked at we looked at what Jesus said in the passage about falling asleep. And we looked at 10 things that I felt that he's pointing to in means that we can kind of understand and draw comparisons with in relation to that state. And then I went into the preach proper, if you like, and preached a passage a little bit and spoke about how Jesus, being the resurrection and life, raised up all the characters, all the friends of his in the passage. That was Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, and then just went into some detail in relation to the individuals and how he looked to achieve resurrection, and actually how he was very comfortable with using other people. So he used Martha to raise up Mary, and actually he used Martha and Mary to raise up Lazarus through their praying and inviting Jesus into the situation. And so it's just wonderful seeing Jesus move just so graciously in that situation, and the end result was everybody was happy, rejoicing, and raised up. So
yeah, brilliant. One of the things you said in the course of it, which it was really arresting and speaks right to the title of Jesus, like, I am the resurrection and the life, is that Jesus, the resurrection is sorry, get it right. Resurrection is something that Jesus is. It's not just something that he does. Obviously he does do it. He raises people up, but it's something he is. Like, I know George and I were talking about that earlier. Like, well, it's such an amazing thing. It's hard to get even grab. What does that even mean? What does that look like? What? Tell us some more about that. The resurrection being something that Jesus is. What does that mean? What does that mean for us?
Absolutely. So, when Jesus speaks about, when Paul specifically speaks, his favourite designation and term for being associated with Jesus as being in him, being in him. And so everything that we have is basically through our being in, so united, so joined. You can't, it's not that Jesus is close. He's in, he's in you, you're in him. You can't get any closer. And that speaks to the resurrection, because resurrection is in him. It's like, it is him. We see that pretty clearly on the cross, and in the resurrection, from subsequent resurrection, because Jesus was killed, he died, but death couldn't hold him down. Why? Because he is the resurrection. It's impossible. You can't hold the guy that is the resurrection down, because he just raises up. And so he going into his crucifixion, he knew that he was a resurrection, and he had great confidence, along with the prophetic declarations right through the Old Testament, that actually he was going to be raised up, and he knew he's the resurrection. And so with us being in him, that is how ultimately we as believers on the last day will be raised from the dead by Jesus himself. And that's something of what it means that he is the resurrection. And also, I did touch on it on Sunday, he doesn't pray for it. Jesus does pray. Someone after the service asked me, I think I've seen Jesus pray in the Bible, and I was like, no, I wasn't what I was trying to say anyway. Perhaps I didn't do a very good job, but he does pray a lot. He prays more than anyone. But when he is raising people from the dead, casting out demons, calming storm, cursing fig trees, and the like, he doesn't pray. He just commands, because that ability is in him, because he is the author of life. So that's what I was saying.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I was watching, it's just come to mind as you were speaking, I was watching something last night. I won't say what it is because it's embarrassing in terms of, no, it's not embarrassing. It's
Barbie?
No, it's just like an old TV detective show. It's just like cringe for other people who don't know the genius of it. Anyway, that's another point.
Inspector Gadget.
Anyway, I was trying to say it so it wouldn't be a distraction, and then it becomes a bigger distraction. Yeah. Everyone's like, what is the program? I'm not going to say. But the setting of it was a church. It was quite a high sort of Anglican church, and it had statues of Jesus on the cross, and it's like, that's such a contrast to the way that we do church. And part of the reason that we don't have that, we don't even in our buildings even have a cross, partly it's because, like, well, Jesus is not there anymore. And I think even as Christians, and in a well-meaning way, you want to be reverent towards the gospel and what Jesus has done on the cross. And that's always going to be something that we're going to talk about and preach about and sing about. And we have communion, because that points us, and we do that because Jesus told us to do it. But we don't want to leave people with the impression that Jesus is still on the cross and somehow that's where he is. But actually, it's the life of God that we're in, being in Christ now and fellowship with him and his power. And it's, I don't know. We were sort of saying before, it's probably even just the doctrine of the resurrection is probably something that we, neglect a little bit.
Yeah, I think Toby was saying earlier, we were talking about it. We do talk about the cross a lot, which is appropriate. But whether the balancing, the weighting of our understanding of the gospel starts with the cross and doesn't often finish with the resurrection. Yeah. Or in our preaching or our songs, we might lean towards the minor key and the suffering, and the blood, in which are all in things we want to do, but might not necessarily get so much to the resurrection and to the joy of the other side of it. And maybe we do when we get to Easter or something like that. We'll do a Good Friday and we'll do an Easter Sunday, and then we'll sing "See What a Morning" or some song that we don't get out any other time of the year, because that's when we get to the resurrection. And I wonder why we think that might be, and how we address that. I think one thing that we said was we live in a society, live in the West, where actually death isn't our primary concern. Maybe it is for you personally, but in general, particularly considering the context into which the scripture was written initially, death is prolonged. Our average lifespan is much longer than it was then. People who are older go into older people's homes. We have hospitals for people who are sick, and we can be kind of quite clinical in how we push death away and then rush to escapism and things. And so maybe our felt need isn't necessarily, I need to hear that there's a resurrection, I need to hear that death's defeated. And our felt need is, I'm feeling a bit bad about myself, I want to feel fulfilled, and maybe I'm feeling guilty about something, I need to feel forgiven. I want that kind of hope there. But I wonder if when, as songwriters, preachers, pastors, just members of a church loving each other, when we know people's felt needs, maybe it's not always immediately death, and so the resurrection doesn't immediately speak to our felt need, wrongly or rightly. What else do we think? Why else do we think that might be?
Yeah, I was going to flip it around and be like, if we're saying maybe we neglected just generally the resurrection as a doctrine, and not, if we as a church and as Christians got hold of it more, what difference do you think that would make to people's Christian walk, there's understanding, if they were more living in the good of the knowledge of Jesus' resurrection, not just that he's died for our sins and what the cross has accomplished, but what the resurrection has accomplished?
I genuinely think we'd be happier. I think we'd be more joyful, really, because it's such a glorious, happy doctrine. It feels like I've studied it quite a bit just recently. I feel like I've done 2 or 3 preachers that that's been a key note of the message, and it's just glorious. Like, when we think about death, like, it's like the great Christian hope is the resurrection. Like, there's really good news to talk about in the intermediate state. Once a Christian, when a believer dies and is in the presence of Christ, spoke about that a lot on Sunday. But that's not actually the end of it. The great Christian hope is the resurrection from the dead. The New Testament speaks about that. And when we consider, actually, we think about death and we think, oh, that's such a sad thing, a sorrowful thing. Like, one day I will die and I'll leave my family. And we think, oh, that's this big looming thing hanging over us. But actually, it's not the case. What the looming thing hanging over a believer is the resurrection of the dead, and that is life eternal. That is heaven coming down from heaven to earth, and being reunited with the earth as it was once in the beginning, and God Himself dwelling, walking in the cool of the day with us. He will be our God. We will be His people, and we will be on this earth. It's not even like we go away to heaven. Like, it's like we're going to come back. So just as Jesus will return, we will return, actually, because this earth will be the location where God lives, where God abides. And I think when you start to think that, when you think, I'm coming back, like, I'm going away, and that is ultimately the final word and the eternal word of my life, it just does you good. It makes you happy, and it doesn't make you feel less death, because I've got something so much better coming, just the other side of death, as we call it, when we fall asleep, and I've got even better coming at the return. And actually, meditating on the resurrection helps us move away from death being this kind of gloomy thing, like the final word on my life, because the final word on the Christian's life is a happy one. It's a joyful one.
That's not to say, though, is it, that there's no place for grief, though, in a Christian's life? I mean, you were talking on Sunday and gave the example of your brother who died and that sort of thing, and I know there'll be lots of people who would be listening to that and would resonate with that, with their own experience of grief, with their own experience of loss. And that's, we don't want to, at the same time, is the hope, but it's not, just get over that. It's not just a sort of, well, you don't need to feel that because Jesus risen again. It's like that is still the grieving for the loss and the separation, even if it's only temporary, is still part of the Christian experience, isn't it?
Of course. And I think, a dear sister came up to me on Sunday after I preached in the morning, and she asked me the question. I said, when I lost my brother when he was 18, I said it was the worst day of my life. And she said, kind of, given all that you've preached, why would you say that was the worst day of your life?
Those two,
And I thought, that's a great question. And the answer I gave to her was this, that in this passage, Jesus wept. Like he legitimately cried. He cried knowing in about 5 minutes I'm going to raise him up. Like 5 minutes.
So it wasn't a super thing,
So like, it's like there's this mingling of sorrow, and that's very appropriate. And this understanding that actually joy is to come. Joy now in the sense that he was with the Lord, with God the Father, if you like, but also a joy to come in the resurrection. And so whenever someone dies, and I do think as well, it's worth saying that I do think that the younger the more, this is an unhelpful word, but I'll use it anyway, the more untimely a person's death is. If a person dies very young, I do think that is I don't say worse, but certainly that it is more inappropriate. It feels more, this isn't right. There's when someone has lived a life and has died at 95 years old, for example, a ripe old age, there's still mourning, it's still great sadness, and it's appropriate to mourn. But there's not the sense of kind of this is really, really wrong. And I think that's worth saying. I think we've just got to be real about it. It's different losing someone that's 95 to a child that's 6 months old. But ultimately, we trust the Lord and we trust His goodness through all of it. And actually, that He's good. He's a good shepherd. And also, I'll take the opportunity to mention as well. I spoke a lot about death. But I didn't speak much about dying, and I did want to just say a couple of words on dying, because I think that there are a lot of people, a lot of Christians, I would say, in my experience, fear death. And when we talk about death, I think we need to carve it into two, right? I think we need to talk about dying and death, because though they are part of the same process, they're two very different things. And I think the Bible does give us lots of encouragement regarding dying, and I see one of the best things that I see in the Bible, one of the most encouraging things I should say, is the thief on the cross. I just see Jesus there, and when you consider he's in his own agony and he's in his own pain, and he as he's there, it's like he doesn't care about his own suffering, and he turns his head to this thief on the cross, and he begins to encourage him, and he begins to coach him, and he begins to lead him through this experience of dying. It's like Jesus is the good shepherd, and he doesn't. This is a sheep now who's just been saved. I am going to lead him now through to the other side. I don't care about myself. I know I'm going to lead him, and he leads him to the other side into paradise, and which is why I think Psalm 23 verse 4 could have been written by the thief on the cross. When you think about it, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because you are with me. Like Jesus, you are with me. And that's not just poetry. It's because Jesus is the good shepherd. He's your good shepherd in life. He's your good shepherd into death. And so we are to expect the presence of Jesus in the process of dying, because he's a great high priest. He's a high priest in Hebrews chapter 4 verse 15 that is able to sympathize with us in our weaknesses, and he sympathizes as one who, and I'll come to an end in a moment, he sympathizes as one who knows death himself. Like, he knows what it is to die, and so he is uniquely able to care for us in our dying moments.
Yeah, and I think one of the aspects, the spin-offs of that, is that the Christian is able to access a much broader understanding of life and death, because Jesus helps us with that. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons, what we're talking about before, of why people in this day and age, and we're all susceptible to it, are so focused on the material, and the present, and want to shun away death, is because outside of Scripture, there's not good answers to it. There isn't. You might as well ignore the question, because there isn't. What happens when we die? If you think you just say, it's nothing, and all you're left with is just the reality of it, the pain of it, the loss of it, and there's not good. So it's understandable that people don't want to talk about it. I've noticed, I'm sure you have as well, culturally. In recent time, there has been a bit more of a move to acknowledge that we need to talk about death, and I think that there's examples where people, in terms of podcasts and on the news articles and in newspapers and people, and that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. Partly it's a good thing because it's a Bible thing. It's being real about truth rather than just trying to ignore it and suppress it. But that's the stark contrast, isn't it, between I guess secular views about death and dying and what Christ has said. Is like the best, without Christ, the best is just trying to make the idea of death a bit more tolerable. But Jesus, and the resurrection, there's an actual answer to this, and I think, and that chimes with people's experience. That you mentioned about when people die and it's untimely. It's like there's such a wrongness that everyone feels for that, isn't there? That this is not like death itself, but particularly it's not right, and I think everyone feels that, but without any frame of understanding and real truth that speaks to that, people don't know what to do with that. But they feel the emotion, and it's actually a really a wonderful evangelistic opportunity to say there actually is hope, and it is real, and it is true. And that's another way of speaking, for the church, for us to be speaking about the resurrection as an important thing. It's not just important for the church; it's important for the world. It's important for the people that we're trying to reach. And actually, again, probably sure in your experience, when you have a friend, or have a family member who has experienced grief, experienced loss, that can be an opportunity to people are forced into be able to speak about the reality of life and death in a way that not before, and actually people can be quite open to hearing about so wait a minute, I'm going through, what do you actually believe about this, because I'm struggling right now. And as we want to help people, and not just like, oh right, I'm glad you asked, well here you go. It's like meet people in that pain, but actually speak of the hope that we know in him.
And we are creatures of hope, human beings, Christian or not. We are. When you taking that example, we all, I'm sure, will know someone who has lost someone, and who don't believe in any in God, don't believe in Jesus or in God the Father, and but they may say things like, I feel their presence, I know they're still with me, I know they're in a better place, and it's not based on what they believe. But there's something in them that longs.
Hope.
Hope, right? There is, but it's almost like the dots haven't been connected, because it doesn't make sense to not believe in God and to believe in annihilationism, which is to that we cease to exist. We just don't, we just finish at the point of death, and then still believe in those things. And the Bible has, as you're saying, Matt, just good news. And the best thing is, it's not just, this will be nice. This would be a nice thought if this were true. Like this is no. There's been a man that has died and has risen from the dead and has lived to tell the tale and continually leads the church as someone who knows what it is to die and rise. And so it's just, there's real concrete stuff, and that's why we often talk about if a person is struggling with with Christianity, if you're struggling with Christianity, look into the evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is the great elephant in the room. It is, people think that, surely that's been disproved. That can't have been. I'd encourage you to go on Alpha and look at the just the evidence. It's overwhelming. And through history, there have been people that have tried to write books seeking to disprove the evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and they themselves have ended up Christians, because it's just so convincing. So it's a great hope, it's a firm hope, and it's real.
Yeah. Well, there you go, George. We need to write some more songs with about the resurrection, don't we?
Come on,
It was
let's do
great
it.
to be able to sing Lou and Nathan's song. We'll meet him in the air. You led after Toby
Yeah.
Proofs. And
Yeah.
What's it like singing their song with them in the crowd?
Oh, you just try not to catch their eye. Look anywhere else. Look at Jesus.
Yeah.
Look at Jesus.
Brilliant. Well, that's coming to land on that one. So yeah, we'll end it there today. Thanks so much, George and Tobes, for your contributions there. Great discussion as always. And as I say, unfortunately, we will not be back next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks' time, when we'll be speaking about, this is where I always forget what it is, but it's me preaching, so I need to remember. It is the way. That is I Am the Way. We're taking a few weeks to look at I Am the Way, the truth, and the life. And so, yeah, we're going to be looking at that one in 2 weeks' time. Hope you can join us again for Live Lunch. See you soon. Have a great week.
Bye.